Stream as well. My name is Saul Kaiserman. I'm coming to you from New York City. This week's Torah portion has a great um, deal of variety in it, and we're going to look at one particular moment of potential reconciliation between two siblings is going to be the focus of our study today. Before we begin, or actually, why don't we say the blessing for the Torah and then I'll make this statement. So let's join together. Baruch atah
Ata
Adonai
Adonai
Eloheinu melech
Elohim
haolam
Melech Haolam
asher
Asher
kidshanu
Kitshanu
mitzvotav
B'mitzvotav
v'tzivanu
Tzivanu
la'asok
La'asok
b'divrei
Divrei
Torah.
Torah.
Blessed is the power that gives us the ability to engage ourselves deeply with the richness of our tradition, to learn from it, to become inspired by it, to grow from it, and to treat it as if this was meant to be our business on this day of rest. So just I wanted to say a quick mention. I think I'll do the same introduction when I'm back with you again in the coming months. Um, I really enjoyed our time together last month, and as I always do. But I also want to name that I do spend a fair bit of time on the preparation of the materials for this class, and there are occasionally moments where individuals may um, kind of take us in a different direction in their commentaries. And so if and also I want to make sure that everybody's voices are getting heard, not only some people who maybe have a great deal to offer. So if I see that anyone is speaking for like, an extended period of time or is taking us in a direction that's really going differently from the area of the text that I want to focus on, I hope that you'll all be understanding if I kind of redirect us back to what I brought in. I felt a little bit rushed in the ending of our session the last time I saw you all, and I'd like to make sure that we all are able to not that I'm the most brilliant or the only person with something to say, but I'm putting the effort into preparing materials for all of you. I'd like to be able to give you the richness of what I've the research that I've done so that we can engage in conversation. But in this particular session, I'm doing much less presentation. Thank you, Rebecca, in order to give more opportunity for you to debate something that is a debate that goes back to the times of the earliest rabbis. So I'm going to catch you up with where we are in the piece of the narrative that we're going to focus on. Um, Jacob, one of the patriarchs, has been living outside of the land of Israel, working for his uncle Laban, where he has become wealthy, has now two wives as well as two concubines, 13 children, and is on his way back to the land of Israel after hearing a message from God that it's time to go back home. Um, on the way, he sends a message in Genesis 32:4 to his brother Esau saying, I'm on the way to come back to Israel. You'll recall, of course, he's famously stolen the birthright and the blessing from his brother Esau. And so we can imagine that maybe there's some trepidation in sending this message out to his brother. Everyone's familiar with the story that I'm sharing. Like I'm just trying to ground you within it without recapping it too extended in too much of an extended way. Jacob gets the message almost immediately that his brother Esau is indeed coming to meet him with a contingent of 400 men. Elsewhere in the Bible, that number of 400 is associated with a fighting force. So we wonder what it is that Esau's intentions are as he's coming forward. Jacob then in chapter 32 divides his camp in two. He puts two of his wives and some of his children in one camp, the others in another camp. He divides up all of his properties, perhaps to like maybe have half be able to survive if this should become a warfare. We don't totally have insight into what his intentions are. He makes a direct appeal to God to protect him. And then he starts sending messengers with huge bribes and gifts to his brother on ahead, that each of them, as they're coming down the road with, oxen and sheep, and his brother Esau sees them and says, who are you and where are you going? They're instructed to tell Esau, we're coming with gifts for you from your brother Jacob, who's behind us. Um, he then famously has the night of wrestling with the angel, where his name is changed to Yisrael. And that's where we are now in the text. It's the following morning. He's about to meet his brother Esau. I'm going to share screen here for this text. I know that many of you have commentaries and texts of your own, but there's a reason why I'd like to make sure we're all able to see the Hebrew of this text. So, um, is everybody able to see this, and is it large enough for you? Yeah. Okay. Would anyone please read for us verse 1 in English? If you have the Hebrew, go ahead, but English is fine.
I always seem
Thanks,
to.
Rebecca.
Looking up, Jacob saw Esau coming with a retinue of 400. He divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two maids.
You can keep going.
Putting the maids and the children first, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last.
Okay, so he's already divided up all the rest of his camps, and now he's even dividing up even further with the concubines, and their children are now going to go forward first, and then Leah, and her children, and finally Rachel and her son Joseph are going to take up the rear together with Jacob. So that's going to be the final people who Esau is going to encounter. Could be that he's trying to build up like a hierarchy. It could be that he's putting the ones that he's least worried about encountering danger first. Jacob's a tricky guy. We don't really know what his intention is here. Let's keep going. Okay, so here's the moment of meeting. Verse 3.
He himself went on ahead and bowed low to the ground 7 times until he was near his brother.
Okay,
Esau,
stop there. Stop there just for a second. Okay. So Jacob's action is to bow low seven, like he's like approaching like this, right? Um, Kind of reminiscent of approaching a monarch, right? Like he's treating his brother like royalty. Like, I am coming forward as your servant. You know, seven is like this mystical, magical number in the Torah, a number of completion. So this is a sense perhaps of subservience to his brother as he moves forward. Okay, here's the verse that we're going to look at with greater care. Rebecca, give it to us.
Esau ran to greet him. He embraced him, and falling on his neck, he kissed him, and they wept.
Okay, let's take a look at this verse and Esau's reaction. Just first instinct, positive reaction, negative reaction. How do you interpret Esau? What do you see happening? What actions do you see Esau taking? Let's get a little bit about Esau's reaction here.
Well, I think it was an overload of emotion. They hadn't seen each other for a quarter century, did you say? And then
Oh, yeah.
he
20
first
years. That's right.
received, before seeing his brother, he had received all of this livestock. So he was overcome with emotion.
What are some of the words you're seeing that indicate emotion in
He
this scene?
ran, embraced, fell, kissed, wept.
Beautiful, right? All these action words, emotional action words. Many people characterize Esau as one of the most emotional of all of the characters in the Bible. One of the ones who, he weeps, he shouts, he's like there's one theory of Dr. Orahorn Prauser that Esau perhaps has ADHD and like can't contain his impulsivity and his emotional state that is always so present wherever he is. Um, yeah, let's take a look at some of those words. Running, does that remind you of anybody else that you've studied in the Bible? Who else runs? All right, I'll give you this one. Abraham, for example, comes running to meet the guests who come into his tent, who turn out to be angels. Um, his servant runs to meet Rebecca. It's mostly a sign of eagerness, right? Like, I'm going to run forward. And again, a sign of humility, right? Like, you are my priority. Um, Falling on the neck. It's like an embrace, but even more so. It's such a visceral kind of an image. It appears two other times in the book of Genesis, both in the context of Joseph, Jacob's son, when he reunites with his family in Egypt. Once first with Benjamin, his younger brother, who he had been longing to see and who didn't come down with the brothers to Egypt the first time, and then with Jacob, his father, who also had not come down the first time. So it's a symbol of a family reunion is how that text is used, embracing. But now I want to call your attention to the Hebrew for just a moment, and then I'm going to take down the shared screen. You can obviously see the trope marks, which are typical of any passage, to help us mark the cantillation marks in it. Does anyone notice anything else unusual about this line of Hebrew text? Anything that you might not typically see in a line of Hebrew text? I can make this even larger.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, there. Yeah,
There's a lot
Cindy?
of extra
The
dots.
dots above a word,
Yeah, do you see that?
which could
Does
be a
everybody notice
scribe's
those?
mistake or intentional.
That's wonderful. So you're saying maybe a scribe accidentally put those dots there, or maybe a scribe deliberately did? I love that. That's great. Okay. Those dots are what I want us to talk about, but I first want to tell us that the word that they are over is Vayishakehu, and he kissed him. Okay? And Esau kissed Jacob, and then they wept, right? They wept. All right? Everybody with me? I'm going to stop screen sharing. Okay, so Cindy brought forward a lovely theory, like there's these dots here. Maybe they're deliberate, and maybe they're a scribal error. What do they mean? So, oh, go ahead, Eric. I see you have a hand raised,
I
Eric.
think in The Godfather, part one brother kissed the other before he got killed, and it was like The Godfather part one. You know what I'm talking about? And it was like a kiss
Absolutely.
of death. It was a kiss of death because it was like he was foretelling what he was going to do with the traitorous brother when he encountered him in the lake, in Lake Tahoe. Isn't that
That's right.
something? And and
That's
it was like
beautiful. I
a
mean, that's
farewell kiss. It was like a farewell kiss to his brother that he knew what was going to happen because he was traitorous to the family for some reason. But that's why I saw the kiss of death. That because it was like they now he's saying goodbye to Esau, like he's not going to see him again in his
okay.
life
Okay,
because the Jewish people had to do their own thing because
okay, Eric,
Jacob had a mission.
thank you for the point. Okay,
Thank
I
you. I'm going to
appreciate it.
rest.
That's great. That's great. I love that analogy to the Godfather. Obviously, also in the New Testament, Jesus is famously betrayed by Judas with a kiss. We'll come back to this question of the meaning of these dots. Let's come back to that. But first, let's talk about the dots themselves. Why are they there? I want to follow up on Cindy's point. Like, are they a mistake? Are they there on purpose? So it seems that they're there on purpose. This actually happens 15 times in the course of the Hebrew Bible, 10 times in the Torah. There are places that are marked with dots like this. Um, and most of the time, it's one dot over a single letter. Sometimes it's multiple dots. This is one of the only two times that it's a full word that has dots over it. And these dots date back to earliest Masoretic text traditions. The rabbis in like early commentaries are already aware of these dots. So these are not a later addition from a more recent time. These date pretty far back, these dots, like to the earliest written Torah scrolls that we have these dots in them. So what do they mean? It's likely that they are some sort of an indication by the scribe that there's something about this word that they want you to pay attention to. We see this also in ancient Greek texts where there are dots or asterisks that are used to mark questionable passages in a text. And there's three different possibilities that we could see in what these dots mean. One possibility is that the dots themselves might be an indication from the scribes that this is a mistake. The word or the letter should not be included. You're supposed to ignore the word or ignore the letter. So in this case, just ignore the kiss entirely. It didn't happen. It doesn't belong in the text. But in other places, it's more logical. There's a vav, perhaps, that's repeated, or a yud that doesn't make sense in the word. If you look at the dot and you take that out, it makes the word make sense. So there's some possibility that the early scribes were already saying this is a word that should not be in the text at all. A second possibility is that the word is supposed to be read differently than the way that it's printed. So it looks one way, but you're actually supposed to read it in a different way. So it might be that there's a vav there, but you're really supposed to read it like a yud. And again, that would be an indication from the early scribes that there's some sort of a mistake in the writing. But there's a third possibility, which is that the scribes are hinting that there's some sort of special alternate reading that we're supposed to be making sense of from this text, much like Eric is suggesting. The kiss is not really a kiss, like kind of unlike the Casablanca song. The kiss actually means something different. And that's what the rabbis actually looked at with this word from early times. They wanted to understand what might be a different way that this word could be understood. Why does this word merit special attention? And that's the conversation that I want to invite us into. So I'm going to lay out this dispute the way that Rashi, the greatest of all biblical commentators, does. Rashi, French biblical commentator, kind of the founder in many ways of the modern commentary over 1,000 years ago. He's quoting a much earlier source, Sifrei, one of the earliest biblical commentaries from the 2nd to 4th century. And he lays out two possible interpretations of this kiss. On the one hand, that Esau, according to Rashi, some say, did not kiss Jacob with his whole heart. Okay, this was an empty kiss. He didn't really mean it. It was a fake kiss, right? A little bit like the way that Eric is suggesting it. And when Rashi says some say this, he's referring to commentaries. This is a tradition, and we're going to look at some of those commentaries after I've heard your points. However, he also quotes Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, again, very early rabbi, mystic from the 1st century, who says, it is well known that Esau hates Jacob, right? Fair enough. Nevertheless, he became merciful at that moment and kissed him wholeheartedly. So even though Esau has this reason to hate Jacob after stealing the birthright and the blessing, and could potentially be coming indeed to wage war against Jacob, at this moment, he sees Jacob, is filled with emotion, and kisses him genuinely. So that's kind of the dispute that Rashi is laying out for us between rabbinic commentaries. Do we align we might have other interpretations as well, but for Rashi, it's do we align that the kiss is fake, was not wholehearted, as many early commentators say, or do we align with the idea that it was a real kiss and that Esau was genuine in his reaction? Okay, I'm going to open this up to conversation about how you read the text and see if you can give a basis for your explanation. I'm okay with pulling sources like The Godfather from outside of the text if you want as a way to back this up. You can psychology, whatever you like. Howard, why don't you get us started?
My first reaction to this, as to so many things, especially in Genesis, is that if it's true that this is telling us, well, it says they kissed each other, but really they didn't kiss. This is very, very important. And when they're telling it to us, they would want us to know it. So it brings up the question, well, how come was it so important? Why did they make it so obscure? They could have just said it instead of saying the opposite and having it 1,000 years later, somebody has to point out the orthography or gematria or something that's made up and isn't even in the history. I can't understand. I can't put myself in the frame of mind where you would do that and try to make something that's most important also be the most obscure.
Okay, so for you, the dots are an indication that the word should not be taken for granted. There's something wrong with the kiss.
Some people are saying that. I'm not even saying. I'm not taking this. Not important to me.
You're not going to take a side yet.
Right
Okay.
or not. Just some people are saying that, and they do it again and again. They have these things that are very, very obscure, and sometimes it didn't need even something. Some there are people, commentators in the 20th century, 21st century, whatever century it is today. I forgot. That also do the same thing. They come up with totally new, fanciful, and to me, or at least very obscure ways of looking at the Torah that nobody almost, it took 2,000 years for somebody to come up with this interpretation. Thus depriving all those people for 2,000 years of what was perhaps the real meaning. It just doesn't.
Okay, so Howard, you're in good company in that form because Rashbam says the exact same thing you say. He says, look, just read it according to its simple meaning. It was a kiss. That's all it was. Read it. He says it in one word commentary. Kupshuto. It means that's pshat reading. It means it's simple meaning. Just read it like that. Ignore the dots. They don't mean anything. Right. I'm going to just go down the line as you appear on my screen. David?
Yes, I believe it was just a regular kiss, a sincere kiss. And I recently had a Jacob Esau experience. For 20 years, my brother, and suffice to say, after he got married, this occurred. There was no incidents about birthright or anything. He and his wife and his kids never accepted invitations to my parents' blessed memory for Thanksgiving, for the Seder. They always had an excuse or anything. Then when my wife and I took over this Thanksgiving and the Seder, because my parents got we're too old to do it, but they loved to come to our house. They still never would come, never invited us to their daughters' birthday events, etc., even though we always did over the time. So I took a hint, and I just, for 20 years it's been. About a month ago, my sister told me that my brother was diagnosed with ALS. And she said when she sees him, he's just hobbling along. He's only 63. So she said, you may want to call Michael. So I called him up. I said, let's, are you available to meet? Let's get together. So we met, to have lunch, and when I saw him hobbling with the cane, and he looked, I never saw anybody with it like that, but we hugged, and we were for a couple hours, we were just sitting there talking, reminiscing about things, nothing about what occurred, over the past 20 years. And it was like we were brothers again, like we did things before. So that was Jacob and Esau. And if it wasn't for Torah study and my knowledge of them, I might not have done that. And I thank God that I was able to do it, and it just happened about a month ago.
Oh my goodness, David, what a beautiful, beautiful story. Thank you so much for the vulnerability of sharing that with us. And wow, what a way to like make this Torah passage come alive for all of us in such a deep and beautiful way. And just I'm so honored that you shared that with us. Thank you.
And I told my sister, and she was just so happy that we reconciled.
Thank you. Right. I'm going to give a text that backs up your perspective, but I'm going to hold off on it for now because I want to save it and let just your own words be the one. I want to let them sit on their own for a minute. Brad, would you like to go next?
No, not not after David. David, I feel for you, and oh my gosh, how emotional that had to have been for the two of you, along with your sister, to have that reunion. Oh my gosh. Okay, let me come back to the point that I wanted to make, which was that I think there's some cognitive dissonance that Jacob is experiencing, or that Esau is experiencing at this point. Esau, because Esau he was manipulated by the trickster Jacob.
Yes.
When Jacob sent gifts, when you send gifts in the ancient world, you're entering into an aspect of the hospitality code that requires you then to return, to have a gift exchange, as the philosopher Marcel Mauss has described. And it's a way of constraining the other party when you give them a gift, because then they're obligated to return a gift to you. So Jacob is under some kind of constraint upon him, and yet is his heart really in it? And I think that's the cognitive dissonance that's going on in this kiss. Yes, he's going through the motions, but is he really feeling it? Or has he been constrained by the hospitality code?
Whoa. Whoa, that's beautiful. And so the dots could be to signal Esau's ambivalence in this moment, not because of Esau's motives, but because of his concern about Jacob's motives. And how sincere is Jacob in this moment of potential repair? I love that. That's such a beautiful, thoughtful reading, Brad. Thank you so much. I don't have that one in the commentaries. Let's say that that's a fresh interpretation, which is an exciting thing for me. Perhaps others have said it before us, but let's have it live with us as a fresh insight into the text. I love it. Mara, Harv?
So I just said to Harvey, so what is the original question? And I think the original question is, was the kiss honest or not honest? And my answer is yes. I think all those dots tell us that what we're being asked to ask ourselves how to respond. And the answer to that is all of these ways are legitimate ways to express regret.
So the dots become a signal of the ambiguity of the moment, that we could read it either way.
And that in any situation of this kind, there is no one right answer. That if we have regret about something that has occurred in our lives, that there are a multitude of ways to deal with that regret. And our responsibility is to determine the way that will enable us to forgive ourselves as well as to forgive the other person.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So there's, we associate a kiss with love and with forgiveness, but then you're bringing up, like, was there actually a self-forgiveness happening and a self-love happening in this moment as well, particularly for Jacob, who, as we've heard, is the trickster, who maybe can't be trusted, even in this moment might be being deceitful, just as Esau might be being deceitful. It, I love the way you're highlighting how that the dots could just be a way of pointing out this the ambivalence that each of them must be feeling in this moment, and the ambiguity of us as readers, the depth of psychological richness that's possible. Thank you.
And that also connects for me back to Jacob wrestling. Was Jacob wrestling, in fact, with himself?
Beautiful, beautiful. So when Jacob is meeting Esau, in what ways is Jacob actually confronting himself? Later on, Jacob's going to say to Esau, "When I see your face, it's like I'm looking in the face of God." So that really supports your reading in a beautiful way. I love it. Fern.
Um, First of all, David, thank you for sharing the extraordinary experience. I too had such an experience when I was 11 years old. My mother was a Holocaust survivor. In 1939, she was separated from, they were in Warsaw and separated from the rest of her family. And as far as my mother knew, for the next 20 years, she had no surviving relatives. And in 1959, when I was 11, the Red Cross managed to find my mother's brother who was surviving in Israel. And she and I went to Israel for them to reunite. And I was a child, and I remember standing when they greeted each other, and they had not seen each other for over 20 years. And they just cried and cried and hugged. It went on for, it seemed to me that for a very long time. It's probably one of the most emotional moments of my life that I can remember. And to indicate in any way that it should be because they had ADHD or anything, it is the most human of responses to respond to one's family, good or bad, whatever it was. It's a fundamental, deep connection that neither time nor any stories can alter. It wells up. It just appears, and as it did with David, as it did with my parents, and it remains for me.
I mean, that's first of all, thank you for sharing also that beautiful story. And the way that I'm hearing it is like the dots are almost like a let's linger on this moment for a little bit longer. Let's not rush on to what happens next. Like, let's note the power of this moment of encounter. And like this kiss is, so pregnant with possibility for healing and reunion and restoration, in a way that we all crave in our lives with those with whom we've had either a falling out or any other experience that needs repair. I love this. Let me say, I don't know if you all are aware of what an incredible group you are to study with. I hope you all appreciate that about your study with one another. I imagine that's part of why you keep coming together over the years. But like, I mean, I had no idea we were going to go to all these places with this text. It's incredible. Rebecca, let me pass it along to
Yeah, I
you.
want to add to what Mara said because reading ahead, Esau tries to give the gifts back. So where is the sincerity? Is it ambivalence? I think it's ambivalence. There's no, I mean, there's a lot of emotion, but the fact that he tries to give it back is odd to me also.
All right, let's hold off on reading that for a second, and
Yeah.
we'll go there.
Yeah.
We have enough time, so we'll
Yeah.
go there. But let me first stay on this. Let's do as the dots are suggesting from Fern's perspective. Let's linger here for just another moment. David, did you want to also take us forward, or did you?
You're muted,
Yeah,
David.
yes, the fact that they wept, I think, is key because no matter what motivations there were to give the gifts, to show, hey, I'm subservient to you, or it should be exchanged, or whatever emotions or what they wanted to accomplish, not what they wanted to accomplish, motivations they had. The fact that they kissed, you can't hide that emotion. You can chuckle at a bad joke and fake it's funny. You could fake some sort of emotions with certain things, but the fact that they kissed, unless you're an actor, you can't fake it. So that's what I think is key. Because after that, Esau embraced him, fell upon his neck, and kissed him. Then they wept.
Nice. I love that you're noticing the they wept there. I'm gonna take us to that. I'm gonna give you now some of the classic commentaries on this, and I think you're gonna hear resonances of some of your own thinking on this. So first, George Savrin, a contemporary writer, notes that when Jacob was deceiving his father, Isaac, one of the things that they did was they kissed. And, in that moment, Jacob was pretending to be his brother Esau. And so here there's a possibility of either repeating that moment of deception, or there's this possibility of opening up a new way that restores or repairs or heals that previous moment when Jacob deceived his father and stole his brother's birthright. So one thread of traditional commentary sees Esau as being deceptive, kind of the way that Eric like laid us out at the beginning. This is actually a Godfather moment. Esau's actually got, the knife behind his back. The kiss is, for whatever purposes, is not real. In fact, Rabbi Yanai in Genesis Rabbah, so we're talking now like third, fourth century at the latest, says this teaches that Esau tried to bite him. The word for bite is nashach. The word for kiss is nashech. And so the dots may be to hint to us that it wasn't actually a kiss, it was actually a bite that Esau was doing. And then and they cried, he says, well, it's one about his neck and the other about his teeth. We're gonna have to unpack that for a minute. So the neck is obviously he bit him on the neck. The teeth, I'm gonna come back to in just a second. Like, what does that mean that he cried about his teeth? This thread becomes a story about the inevitability of anti-Semitism in the world, as kind of famously put forward by Moshe Feinstein just over 100 years ago. Esau, in this depiction, represents all non-Jews who can never actually be trusted. So Jacob believes in this moment that Esau still plans to kill him, as Rebecca had said to him back in Genesis 27:42 before he fled to Haran. And, she warned him, your brother's going to try to kill you. You better get out of here. And Jacob hasn't ever left that mindset of he's coming to kill me, he hasn't forgiven and forgotten. And this becomes a claim that there's always going to be, for those of us who are in the Jewish world, a sense that the other outside world is out to get us. And I'm cognizant of the unfortunate events that you've had at Wilshire Boulevard over the past week with the protests. And, I want to name that, like, not to make a statement that I believe anti-Semitism is inevitable or that it's always in the world, but I can understand where someone like Rabbi Yanai, writing after the destruction of the temple, might be feeling that trauma, and take that perspective. So what's the teeth? Like, how are the teeth getting into it? Like that he's crying because of his teeth. So according to Rabbi Yanai, the dots teach us, not only that he didn't come to kiss him, but to bite him, but that Jacob's neck at that moment turned to marble, and the teeth of the wicked one were blunted. So there's a moral message that Rabbi Yanai is pushing forward here of divine intervention. Kind of, you could see it a little bit of the Hanukkah story perhaps in it, of like God's salvation, that God is going to save Jews from their anti-Semitic enemies, will turn our necks to marble when they try to bite us. Okay, so that's one line of tradition that speaks about the kiss as being treacherous. Many of you pushed us in the direction of the kiss being sincere, and I actually prefer that as well. I want this to be a story of reconciliation and healing. I'd like to believe that that's a possibility. Um, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar starts with this, that says that the way that you can know this is that when the number of the dots and the number of the letters are equivalent, that means that the dots are adding something to the text. And in this case, what we're adding is that even though we might think that Esau is coming with the intent that's treacherous and deceptive and evil, nevertheless, the kiss was wholehearted. Redac, writing in France, he lived between 1160 and 1235, says, yes, this was a kiss of brotherhood and friendship. And we know this because he fell upon him and wept. And he says, so why was the word dotted? Some people say it wasn't a wholehearted kiss, but according to the simple meaning of it, it was a complete kiss, right? As Howard was pointing to, it was a real kiss. It was sincere. And so the dots are meant to teach us that all of you who might think it's an insincere kiss, you're wrong. It's a sincere kiss. That's exactly what it's there for, is to remind us of that. And David, that's kind of what I was thinking of when you were sharing your story. The Eitz Yaakov goes even further than that. And in his commentary, this is from the early 18th century, in Western Hamburg, he says, okay, so what are the dots for? It's to double the meaning of the kiss. It's like he kissed him and he kissed him and he kissed him. That's what it's meant to show us, which kind of, I think, aligns with your reading, Fern, of like, this was a super kiss. This wasn't just like any ordinary kiss. This was a very powerful moment. And like, we want to know that, and the dots are meant to tell us that this was a wholehearted, not a simple kiss, but a wholehearted kiss. So I like the way that the commentators point us in that direction. I'm gonna leave us with that, but I want us to kind of go a little bit into the following passages where Rebecca was taking us. First, Marina, why don't you jump in because you haven't said anything yet, and then I'll take us with the minutes we have left into what happens next and see, where do we stand with Jacob and Esau as a result of this moment of meeting. Marina, go ahead.
Thank you so much for giving us multiple perspectives of what over the centuries people say. But the sum of it is the interpretation depends on what we want to see. So each of us can read into it what is closer to our understanding of the world or what we wish it to be.
I think you're absolutely right. I think there's many rabbis who like have the message that they want to deliver in their sermon, and then they find the piece of text that's going to support that interpretation from their Torah portion. And I'm not saying that that's wrong. I think that that's what homiletics have done forever. That's the whole point, is to speak to the moment, to speak to the heart. I think as much as we relate to the text as being inspirational, we relate to other people's interpretations of the text as being inspirational. And so I think there's a legitimacy to it as much as it may come across as disingenuous in some ways. Um, so as as Rebecca was pointing us towards, there's then a negotiation that happens between the two brothers around these gifts that Jacob has pushed forward. That if you've been to, the Arab market in Jerusalem or in another country, it really feels very reminiscent of that, with, Jacob saying, please take these gifts. And Esau saying, no, no, I couldn't possibly take these gifts. And Jacob saying, no, you must take these gifts. And Esau saying, no, you can't make, right? Like there's this kind of back and forth between the two brothers. But there may be an interesting undercurrent to it. Esau, when he says, I can't take these gifts. He says, because yesh li rav, I have a lot. I have so much rav, like in toda rabbah, right? Thank you very much. Um, he might here be alluding back to the blessing that Jacob stole from him back in Genesis 27:28. May God give you, the blessing that he received from Isaac, the kind of remaining blessing. Do you have a blessing left for me? May God give you of the dew of heaven and the fat of the earth a great deal, Rav, of new grain and wine. So it may be that what Esau is saying is, look, I know you stole the blessing. I know you stole the birthright, but I still got enough for myself from our father. Like, so it's like a statement of sufficiency. Like, I appreciate that you want to give me all these gifts, but I'm good. Like, I've made it. I don't need more gifts in order for us to like have this moment of reconciliation. David, do you want to jump in?
It reminds me directly of when Abraham wanted to purchase the grave sites in the caves of Machpelah, and he's negotiating, and then the ruler of says, no, take them for a price, and they're actually negotiating, and Abraham wanted to make sure he bought them at fair market value or above fair market value, so nobody could say come later on, oh gee, these were just a gift, and take it back. So I think it's almost I'm not going to say the Middle Eastern mentality of bargaining and negotiating, but certainly I think that's very common in all cultures in the Middle East, and certainly it's happened in the Torah.
So there's a very pragmatic element to what you're saying, right? Like if you give it to me as a gift, then maybe you'll take it back at some later date. I don't want to have gifts from you at this moment.
Sure.
Fair.
And maybe it would bind the treaty between them, the oral agreement where Jacob is going one place and Esau in another, and they're not going to fight it.
Very, very nice. I'll come to that in just one second. That's very nice, David. Brad?
Well, I want to come back to the gift exchange theory and process, which is that Esau would be bound if he's bound if he accepts these gifts. And his first reaction is to return the gifts. He doesn't want to be bound, but in the end, he surrenders. And he does accept the gifts. So he agrees to be a part of this gift exchange process, which will be ongoing. So, in other words, all the ambiguity that was in those 5 dots gets resolved when Esau accepts the gifts.
I love that. That's a beautiful interpretation, and we're going to see how in just a moment maybe Jacob undermines that honesty that you're proposing that Esau is bringing forward in this moment. Okay, Mara and Harvey.
So please forgive me if this is off topic, but Esau and Jacob, after this gift exchange, they part.
Yes, all right. I'll get there in just a second.
Okay.
So come in just a second. I'm going to bring us to
Okay.
that moment, and then if it's okay. Um, Jacob. So Esau says, "I have a great deal." Jacob, in response, says, "Please accept my blessing because yesh li kol. I have everything." Now, that's an ambiguous statement, right? But it does resonate with I have the birthright, I have the blessing, I have everything. Should we interpret this as Jacob also acknowledging, like, I have all of these things, I want to make it up to you and give you back what you deserve? Or should we see it as a little bit of like let me remind you, I've got the goods, you don't, so accept my generosity, I'm in a better position. We don't really know, is this really for Jacob a moment of truce? And something happens next that leads me at least to feel doubtful about whether Jacob is as sincere as Esau seems to be in this encounter. Because Esau then invites Jacob to come back to Seir with him and proposes, let me accompany you. And Jacob says, no, no, we prefer to go on our own. And then Esau says, okay, well, let me send some of my men with you to act as bodyguards. And Jacob says, no, no, we've got this. We don't want the bodyguards. You go on ahead and we'll catch up to you. Now, Jacob doesn't actually end up going to Seir. Jacob stays in and builds a camp and calls it Sukkot because he builds sukkahs, like stables for his horses in this case. So seems that he is actually being somewhat deceitful to his brother once again. Like, I'm not actually going to, you could say he changed his mind along the way, perhaps. Like, I'll give Jacob that, but he doesn't accept his brother's offers. So why not? I'm going to just give you three classical commentaries on this, and then Mara, if you want to jump in, you can. Rashi says, and this is going to resonate back to the story we just heard about Abraham, Jacob doesn't want to owe anything to Esau. He's just wiped the scales clean. He's made up for this situation. And now, if he accepts this gift back from Esau, this gift-giving thing is going to happen all over again. And now he's going to be indebted to Esau, and he doesn't want that. He wants this moment of kind of parity to just sit for a while, or perhaps forever. Abravanel says Jacob still doesn't trust Esau in this moment. Like, even if the kiss was sincere, he could change his mind and become hostile again. He doesn't want the troops accompanying him, and he doesn't want to go to Seir and be now in Esau's domain, because what if Esau changes his mind and becomes angry again? And, how can he be safe for his family? And so that's the uncertainty of Jacob. Ramban suggests Jacob just doesn't like Esau and doesn't want his company, doesn't want his men traveling with him, wants to do his own thing, was glad to come back and have this reunion, and is now ready to go off on his own. So three different ways of interpreting this moment of Jacob's apparent deception to his brother and refusal of the gifts. Mara, do you want to close us out with a thought?
Yeah. So for those of us who were at services last night with Rabbi Bukdal, she spoke a lot about communities coming together, obviously for her, Jewish Americans, Korean Americans. This chapter ends with Esau and Jacob going their separate ways. And it seems to me that going our separate ways when Esau was the progenitor of is it the Edomites? Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
So going, I think this is a warning about going your separate ways.
Say more. What's the warning?
The warning is that if we go our separate ways and we decide to not know each other as brothers, then we get anti-Semitism and we get warring between brothers as opposed to the peace we all hope to live with.
And I think that that's a fair reading. And I mean, certainly we have lots of examples of like Abraham and Lot going their own separate ways. Um, there are those examples. I made a case last month that maybe Isaac and Ishmael actually subtly the Torah is hinting that they reunited and stayed close after the death of Abraham. But I think that that's a fair read, and I like it. I like it as a kind of universalist sense of like we need to be able to live together with one another, and otherwise it's going to lead to warfare, this separation. So thank you. Marina?
I have a different perspective. I was thinking about Abraham and Lot living close together and unable to be together. And that's why they separated, because their proximity caused problems. In my opinion, Jacob is afraid of Esau. He doesn't want bodyguards because they can become prison guards. If armed men are accompanying his family, they can take them and enslave or make them hostage or whatever. So he wants to be as far from Esau as possible, and that's what he does, just in a polite way.
So let's take this as kind of like the question, the ambiguity of those dots that's going to Brad, I think we're gonna it's time. So let me see. I apologize. Unless is it short? Can you give us a short one?
I'm just going to say, like Ulysses, another great trickster, he just wants to go home.
Oh, yeah, that's beautiful. Or Dorothy. So I want to kind of end it with that like ambiguity or ambivalence of reading that those dots might lead us with of like, is that kiss a moment of reconciliation or not? Like, is it a moment that, even though Abraham and Lot would kiss one another, they couldn't actually make it work to live side by side? And we're seeing the same thing here? Or is it a moment of deception and there's actually a trust? We need to put distance between us? Or is it, as Mara is pointing to, a sad thing when those previous histories of mistrust or even violence lead us to be unable to find those moments of reconciliation as ones that will enable us to be together from now on and be able to live either in a society together as we would hope for from the Edomites and the Israelites, or for us individuals within our own families as we might have hoped for Jacob, and for Esau. So I want to thank you all for just a beautiful, rich study today. Really, the depth of emotion. I'm going to be carrying this with me throughout this Shabbat. Um, in a moment, I'll do the yard sites with all of you. So I invite you, if you have a name that you want to put into the chat, I'll read it aloud. And for those of you who are logging off, I want to just wish you a very happy Hanukkah. I hope that this season of rededication and renewal will bring you plenty of joy and light, and bring us into 2026 with hope.
Saul, maybe I'm
Yes.
too late. I was going to say it would be wonderful if enough people stayed on so that we actually had a minion.
Well, I think we have a minion right now, so let's see if we can do that. Okay. And we have the Torah with us as well. So I'm going to say the names of those who have passed away during the past month: Hal Daum, David Frischling, Yaakov Grigorevich, Charles Levin, Nell Mendelsohn, Robert Mendelsohn, Dariush Danesh Mogadam, Gerald Steiner, and Morris Mickey Weissman. As always, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing any names. This week's Yartzites: Lawrence Edelman, Abe Alex, Morris Barkin, Aaron Bender, Henry Benheim, Jacob Burlfine, Rosie Mittler Burson, Milton Blaine, Dennis Allen Blake, Elke Brenzel, Gail Brewer, Ray Bubar, Jeanette Richards Kaufman, Lil Cohen, Shelley Ventura Cohen, Holly Brooke Cohn, Muriel Corwin, Etta Copeland Daniels, Ben Dan, George Dimitruk, Alvin Dishler, Lillian Dishler, Charles Dolgener, Rachel Eliachar, Bessie DeFalco, Marge Farber, Robert Fink, Samuel Red Fischler, Evelyn Freeman, Natalie Friedman, Leonard Goldberg, Joseph Charles Goldman, Sandy Gordon, Sue Gottfried, Ruth Green, Stanley Greenberg, Esther Myers Green, Barry Sanford Grief, Toba Hakim, Harold Hecht, Shari Herzoff, Donald Hester, Larry Hill, Rachel Hoffman, Harry Theodore Holmberg, Gertrude Hutchinson, Gloria Ilberman, George Jacobs, Goldie Katz, Rose Kaufman, Ann Kedover, Nejatola Kubayan, Bernard Kislin, Ken Klenner, Ezra Cohen, Alex Copper, Lester Korn, Tilly Crevin, Star Levy, Mark Levine, Shirley Levine Fisher, Herman Lewin, Gladys Liebner, Lillian Lynch, Erna Lovis, Melvin Malat, Gertrude Morantz, Marion Marblestone, Rita Medway, David Millett, William Motel, Donald Eldon Motley, Frank Nadich, Maurice Oakham, Carol Jean Osterweil, Frederick Pashkow, Aaron Pollock, Mary Prell, Gussie Pressman, Theodore Michael Pritkin, Stephen Reed, Walter Reichwald, Joan Rex, Harry Rose, Burton Sanders, Richard Sanders, Mark Sandrich, Semyon Sapozhnikov, Jenny Sauer, Betty Skadron, Ellen Schlaffer, Tamara Schroeder, Paul Schulman, Albert Schwartz, Dorothy Seiler, Lillian Shane, Norman Silver, Seymour Smith, Sylvia Spiller, Ahid Steckler, Jack Stotch, Rose Taylor, Benito Valner, Marshall Wagman, Eleanor Weingart, Bruce Winokur, George Williams, Samuel Witz, Edwin Woolworth, Werner Wolfen, Cindy Wool, Howard Zolan. I want to acknowledge a name from the chat, Teddy Einstein, and then all those who've died defending the state of Israel, along with all those who have no one to say Kaddish for them. We join together as a community to recite the Kaddish. Please join together with me. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah. Yamad divarach rutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayachon v'yomachon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba mevarach le'olam u'amnei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shmei dekudesha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata da'amiran b'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlomo rabba min shamaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael Ve'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mamav, u'ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei Tevel, ve'imru amen. May the one who makes the apparent order that we see up in the heavens, which maybe is a lot of work to create, I don't know, make that kind of order for us down here on earth. Grant us peace, and let us say amen. Thank you all so much for spending your morning with me. I hope you have a great day. Shabbat shalom. Stay
Shabbat
safe.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Really great to see you all.